What could be more terrifying than your own organ trying to kill you? Slowly, from within, tearing tissues with pus and unbearable pain. Now imagine that organ as a tiny intestinal appendage, whose deadly potential was still largely unknown, and inside it, a sharp pin you accidentally swallowed was lodged. This was the nightmare an 11-year-old boy faced in 1735 when he was admitted to St. George's Hospital in London. His long-standing hernia had suddenly transformed into an inflamed, pulsating sac oozing cloudy fluid. The examining surgeon, Claudius Amyand, realized it wasn't merely an obstruction. Something far more sinister was happening inside. A child lay on the operating table with a mystery in his abdomen, and Amyand had no anesthesia, no antibiotics, and no idea what he would encounter when he made the first incision. The surgeon's scalpel cut through the taut skin, opening the hernial sac. From it, a cloudy, foul-smelling fluid gushed out, assailing Amyand with its stench. Within this putrid mass, he discerned something utterly foreign, a swollen, blackened appendix, literally impaled on that very steel pin. The sharp tip of the metal had perforated the organ's wall, and its deadly contents had been slowly poisoning the child's body for several days. In the 18th century, this vermiform appendix was an anatomical enigma, and the idea of removing it was considered pure madness. But Amyand saw before him not a scientific curiosity, but a source of imminent death. He carefully ligated the base of the appendix with a silk thread, and with one precise movement, severed it. Thus, amidst blood and pus, without a name or a theory, the first appendectomy in history was performed. The man holding the scalpel that day was no mere city doctor. Claudius Amyand was a French Huguenot who had fled religious persecution in his homeland to find a new life in England. He was no self-taught bone setter. By 1735, he had risen to the position of chief surgeon to King George II and was one of the founders of St. George's Hospital. This duality, his status as a refugee and a royal physician, perhaps gave him a unique perspective. He wasn't as constrained by the dogmas of the English medical establishment. Where others saw only an inexplicable complication of a hernia, Amyand, accustomed to relying on his own observations, saw an obvious mechanical cause, a steel barb piercing the organ. Any theory was powerless against this simple fact, which demanded not deliberation, but immediate and decisive action. And that action followed without delay. The blade plunged into the inflamed tissue, and pus erupted. Without hesitation, Amyand inserted his fingers into the wound, clearing away the viscous, hot mass. He was searching for the source, the cause, and he felt it, something unnaturally hard, sharp, inanimate. It was metal. Carefully separating the matted tissues, he brought out the entire purulent conglomeration and saw the picture in all its horrifying simplicity. A swollen, almost black appendix, pierced by a needle. There was no time for theories. The surgeon placed a ligature under its base, tightly drawing the silk thread to cut off the flow of infection into the body. And in the next moment, with a single stroke of the scalpel, he removed it. In Amyand's palm lay the tiny organ and the pin, the cause and effect he had eliminated in a matter of minutes. And what's most astonishing is that Amyand himself likely never fully grasped the true significance of his act. He didn't name the disease or write a treatise on appendicitis. He simply saved a child. This was his greatest strength, his unique gift. In an era when doctors sought answers in ancient tomes and debated the imbalance of humors, Amyand looked not to a book, but to the wound. His mind worked not like a theoretician's, but like a first-rate mechanic's. He saw not a mysterious ailment, but a simple malfunction. A sharp object had punctured a vital component, causing a leak of poison, and the solution was just as simple and obvious. Stop the leak and remove the broken element before it destroyed the entire system. For him, there were no authorities beyond his own eyes, and no truth more important than what he could feel with his fingers deep within the opened abdominal cavity. Yet his main adversaries that day were not gangrene or sepsis, but his own colleagues. Those very scholarly doctors who, instead of scalpels, held the tomes of Galen and Avicenna in their hands. Upon seeing the boy's swollen abdomen, they would have gravely spoken of an effusion of black bile and bad miasmas. Their treatment would have been predictable and useless, bloodletting until unconsciousness, purgative remedies, and hot poultices. The very idea of incising the abdomen and removing part of an internal organ would have seemed barbaric to them, the act of a rural bone setter. For these people whose medicine consisted of Latin quotations, Amyand's direct surgical intervention was not a bold breakthrough, but ignorant charlatanry, a crude violation of all canons established 1,000 years prior. But all these ancient canons proved powerless against one undeniable fact. The boy was breathing. And not just breathing, but breathing more steadily with each passing day. While Amyand's colleagues whispered about breaches of medical ethics, the child's fever began to subside. The wound, which the surgeon irrigated daily, gradually healed. A month later, to the astonishment of the entire hospital, he was discharged, alive. The 11-year-old patient, who should have been killed by the hernia, gangrene, and the operation itself, simply got up and went home. Amyand, true to his practical mindset, did not write grand articles about it. He simply coolly described the case in a report for the Royal Society, documenting the malfunction and its successful resolution. And this report, bolstered by a living, healthy child, proved far more substantial than all the tomes of his opponents combined. And with this single action, he changed the very essence of his profession. Before 1735, a ruptured internal organ was tantamount to a death sentence, delayed by a few days of agony. Claudius Amyand transformed this sentence into a solvable problem. He took the inoperable, mysterious internal putrefaction and turned it into a concrete, visible target, a gangrenous appendix that could be severed. He replaced passive observation of dying with active surgical rescue. To his contemporaries, the abdomen was a forbidden, sacred vessel that should not be invaded. Amyand, however, showed that it was merely a cavity containing organs, and if one of them broke down and poisoned the entire body, it could and should be removed. He transformed the surgeon from a craftsman working with bones and skin into a master capable of repairing a mechanism from within. And his main, secret weapon was ridiculously simple. He might just not have known that it couldn't be done that way. He was free from the age-old wisdom that was, in reality, merely a fear of the opened abdominal cavity. While his colleagues saw the abdomen as a sacred vessel controlled by unseen forces, Amyand saw only a complex but understandable mechanism. His mind, unclouded by quotations from dead books, worked with ruthless directness. If one part was rotten, corroded, and poisoning the entire machine, it had to be cut out. This was not the audacity of an ignoramus, but the cold clarity of a practitioner who trusted not the authority of the ancients, but what his fingers felt in the pulsating wound. And this is his main lesson. Great discoveries are made not by those who have read the most books, but by those who, at the decisive moment, dare to close them and simply look with their own eyes.